Hello, it's Kenyon here, back for another episode of Breakdown. So let's get into it this time. The Raptors were the proud owners of the fifth defense in the entire NBA from January onwards. It was the offensive struggles this time that continued to present problems throughout the year. Now, if we zero in on one particular issue that this team may have had, at least in my opinion, I think that it would be their ability to grapple with different types of zone defenses, and I believe that the Raptors have the answer to overcoming this obstacle in the up-and-coming season. So just to give a brief overview of how zone defenses work, what happens is that the coach typically will assign the defensive players to specific areas on the court known as zones. I'm going to provide a picture of this on the screen. A good example of this is a 2-3 zone where two of the players have their zones, quote-unquote, assigned to the top of the arc, and then the three remaining players are actually assigned to guard closer to the hoop, closer to the baseline. And they kind of stay within those zones. Some of the zones may overlap, but that's kind of how it works. I think that there's two ways to beat the zone, and one of those was a huge problem area for the Raptors last year. The first way that the Raptors can potentially beat the zone is through efficient perimeter isolation play, as well as combining that with three-point shooting. So obviously, most people will see what the problem is, but I'm still going to go over it. What the Raptors, in this case, could do is they would be able to force opponents to hyper-focus on one guy, which would open up the floor for other players on the offensive end. And by doing this, and when they do this, it allows that player to have the ability to knife through the heart of the defense, kind of like a knife through butter. A good example of a player who would be capable of this would be Donovan Mitchell, recently traded to the Cavs, or the player that everyone wants the Raptors to get, in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA. These players typically use their craftiness, their athleticism, their footwork to get to the rim at will. So a good example is for Donovan Mitchell. His craftiness, he typically has the ability to use his core strength and utterly just punish defenders with a litany of different moves. Staccato footsteps, and also the ability to demonstrate a very elite ball control while doing all of these drives. For Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that craftiness comes in the form of unorthodox footwork. It's kind of more of a herky-jerky style that really reminds me of a former Toronto Raptor, Delon Wright, who used to possess that herky-jerky style. And it's that kind of style and that kind of unorthodox movement that allows for them both to pull off these long combinations of Euro steps and spin moves to be able to get to the hoop at will. Keeping this all in mind, unfortunately, the Raptors clearly don't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they also don't have, Donovan Mitchell either. At the same time, we do have Siakam and Barnes, and they're able to produce at a pretty decent clip. They're both poised, in my opinion, for huge improvements after what we've seen in the Rico Hines runs, and basically they've been working together since the season basically ended. So, there is room for optimism here. But as we can see from the clip playing right now, they do sometimes seem to struggle at punching right down to the cup, especially on a consistent basis. To his credit, Siakam, his finishing has really improved this past season, but more is never a bad thing. I don't think anyone would complain with that. And we can see that play out and how it played out in the playoffs, especially against Philly. With that all said, obviously the Raptors struggled with three-point shooting a lot last year. So let's move on to the second way. The other way of beating zones is through smart, sound playmaking in tandem with strategic cutting, using a player or two surrounding an offensive hub player that's usually either in the post or at the top of the arc. And this is something that the Raptors really started to unlock later on in the season. And what makes me think that this is a really compelling case for the Raptors to beat their biggest nemesis and to beat that zone is that for all the complaints that Raptors fans have had for a while now about the half-court offensive woes that plagued the team last year, The most efficient offensive possessions, especially in the half-court offense, came from Siakam, Barnes, and OG Anunoby. And they were making plays. Those specific plays were plays that came out of the high post and those other areas that I just mentioned, to the tune of around 1.05 points per possession. So let's start talking about Scottie Barnes right away. To me, when his usage increased, I saw an infectious energy that he was really able to give off to the other guys that began cutting around him. And to me, it's this play right around here that reminds me of another recent Raptor who was incredible at passing in Beer Poppy, aka Marc Gasol. Gasol was really skilled at seeing one or two moves ahead, kind of like how a good chess player is. So he would see several moves ahead of the defense when he was making those passing reads. And I see that with Scottie Barnes, and I also see it with Siakam. So Siakam shouldn't be forgotten in all of this because he showed that maturity in his game to point out additional passing reads as well very early on. And we can see that in this play right here from the 2019 championship run. As we see this play unfold, we can see Siakam playing really well and showing that maturity against one of our favorite teams, the 76ers, where he is able to clearly make a good read, good kick-out pass to JV, who is open for a three, but also signal to JV to turn that one good JV summer three shot into a really good, better shot to Kawhi for the hockey assist, and the shot was good. Another good example of this passing hub action can be seen by looking at late acquisition Thaddeus Young. We can look to the playoffs to see the chemistry that him and Chris Boucher were able to find in this area. Chris himself has talked ad nauseum about Thaddeus being one of the reasons why he started to really cut more, to start to actually play his role more, and kind of started to play a little bit more disciplined, and we can see how this carved up defenses. To me, there is a clear-cut flow in the offense when the Raptors are able to utilize these types of plays, and the Raptors are best when there is ball movement and playmaking and smart cuts consistently. And this is kind of the fulcrum for read and react offense, which is what I think, I'm not in his head, but this is what I think that Nick Nurse wants. So yes, obviously three-point shooting is super important, and this is why the Raptors tried to address that through the acquisition of Otto Porter, and I also expect that the overall core will improve their shooting coming into this season. But with that being said, they do have options with Thaddeus Young and other guys being more well integrated into the team this upcoming season, and I'm really happy about that, personally. I think everyone should feel optimistic about these options and about the fact that the Raptors were able to really work together in the Rico Hines run since early in the season. And that's really a huge season for, being optimistic. So the real question is there are a few options, but will they capitalize? And that's my question to you, the viewer. I do think that time will tell. Tell me in the comments below if you liked this video. Please definitely subscribe, or at least like the video, comment down below, give me your thoughts and opinions, and I think Raptors fans need to start trusting this organization, because Thaddeus Young said it best.
This organization is elite, like one of the top I've ever been a part of. Amazing from day one. The sky's the limit for every individual on this team, for the simple fact of, I think we have a good mixture of young guys with some veteran guys, and obviously me being the elder statesman. This team can be really scary.